With her clothes still smelling of her mother's famous pot roast, YN entered the foyer with a sigh. She let her bag fall, the cool silence of her own home taking the place of the cozy wapai empty of her childhood home. The only sound in the dimly lit living room was the TV's muffled background. Jimin's plate remained untouched on the coffee table as he sat on the couch and stared blankly at the screen. YN was a little worried. He never missed a meal, particularly one that she had meticulously prepared for him when he returned. "Hi, love," she exclaimed, attempting to get rid of the discomfort. Jimin's eyes were heavy-lidded as he turned to face her. He made an effort to smile, but it fell short of his eyes. He said, "You're home early," in a slow voice. As he picked up the half-empty glass of water next to him, YN saw his hand shake a little. She approached and inquired, "Are you okay?" He gave a hasty nod. He said, "Just tired," without making eye contact. She fled to the kitchen, her heart pounding. Dishes were being washed by the maid, a young woman with a keen nose and calculating eyes. The remains of what appeared to be a lavish dinner for two were piled high in the wash basin. The maid's smile was too radiant as she turned. Her voice was too upbeat as she said, "Your mother-in-law said you wouldn't be back until tomorrow." YN felt a knot forming in her stomach. "It was a surprise," she explained, her voice Giti. "I decided to come back early." The maid's smile wavered for a splt second, and YN knew something seemed off. She gr at BB at Jimin's dinner plate and noticed a tiny pill residue on the edge. Her mind reeled. V at gra. It needed to be. The maid had done something unthinkable. She stormed into the living room, the plates clattering on the floor as the kitchen door swung shut behind her. Her eyes were blazing with anger as she aimed. "What did you do?" Confusion etched on his face. Jimin looked up as the TV flickered shadows across his face. "What are you talking about?" In an attempt to sit up, he slurred, clad in a mask of innocence. The maid hurried in. "I just did what your mother-in-law told me. MAAM. It was for your husband's health," she said. YN's fury grew as the implication became clear. "You gave him V at gra," she snarled. The room spun and she felt as if the walls were closing in. UWH, she exclaimed, pointing to the maid. Jimin's eyes widened and his body JURORXC as the realization struck him. YN, no, he replied weakly, reaching out to her, but she was beyond reasoning. Her eyes narrowed into SLTS as she turned to face him. "And you, did you know about this?" He stumbled through his words, attempting to explain, but it was too late. The betrayal was palpable, hanging in the air like a toxic fog. I didn't know," he mumbled. "I swear." But YN's thoughts were already racing. This wasn't just about the maid. It was about his family's $parati search for an heir, the expectations placed on them, and the lengths they were willing to go to ensure their legacy survived. She felt a cold, hard pit develop in her stomach. "Get out," she ordered the maid, her tone cold and unyielding. "And don't ever come back." The maid fled, her eyes wide with fear. YN looked at Jimin, her voice shaking. "How could you let this happen?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with regret and a trace of anger. "They just want what's best for us," he said quietly. "But it's not like that." YN felt her world crumble. "What isn't?" she insisted. "Is this what our marriage has become? A Euro ding ground for your family's legacy?" Jimin attempted to stand, but his legs gave out. The deep high Uggs effects were beginning to set in. "It's not just that," he insisted, his voice straining. "It's about us, about our future together." But YN was already backing away, the distance between them widening with each step. "No," she replied, her voice barely audible. "This is not about us. This is about them, and what they expect from us." With that, she turned on her heel and marched upstairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the hollow house. The silence was deafening, filled only with the harsh beating of her own heart and the bitter taste of betrayal. She knew that this night would change everything, and she wasn't sure if she'd ever trust again. In the bedroom, she discovered the bottle of water she had brought from the kitchen. With trembling hands, she poured a glass for herself, her mind racing. She knew she had to confront his mother and put an end to this madness. But first, she had to deal with the man she had assumed she knew better than anyone. When Jimin finally stumbled upstairs, his movements aided by the deep high Ugg, she sat on the edge of the bed, her mind a whirlpool of rage and pain. He attempted to approach her, but she intervened by raising her hand. "How could you not know?" she inquired, her tone cold. "How could you be so blind?" He docked her pid to his knees, his eyes pleading. "I didn't," he replied, his voice strained. "I swear. But they've been putting so much PR sure on us. I just wanted to make them happy." YN felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly replaced by anger. "Our happiness is what matters," she yelled. "Or has that become too much to ask for?" The T-Euro Nugent in the room was opera $dollar civ, with the weight of unspoken words PR sing DWN on them. They stared at each other, the distance between them appearing insurmountable. "We need to talk to your mother," she finally said, her tone firm. "This ends now." The confrontation with Jimin's mother was expulsive. She need nothing. And her expression was a mix of defiance and disappointment. "You know how important this is," she said, her voice cracking. "The family needs an heir." YN's eyes flashed with rage. "And what about what we need?" she yelled. "What about our relationship?" Jimin's mother let out a dramatic sigh, which made YN's blood boil. "You're both too young to understand," she told them. "This is about more than just love." The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the harsh realities of their situation. However, YN had had enough of playing by their own rules. "We will not be pawns in your game," she declared, her voice shaking with resolve. "We'll have a child when we're ready, not because you force us to." The silence that followed was tense, filled with unspoken threats and unshed tears. But YN remained adamant. She would not let this tant their marriage, not if she had any say in the matter. She turned to Jimin, her hand outstretched. "We're in this together," she stated softly. "We'll figure this out." He took her hand. His eyes filled with both fear and hope. "Together," he agreed, his voice barely audible. Together, they faced the storm that was their family, ready to fight for their love and future at any cost. The following days were filled with tension. YN's mother-in-law was furious, her displeasure visible in every stiff smile and curt remark. Jimin's father, who was usually the calm mediator, remained stoically silent, his eyes revealing his disappointment. YN felt the house's walls close in on them, suffocating them with the weight of unspoken expectations. One evening, unable to bear the opera civ atmosphere any longer, YN pulled Jimin aside. "We can't live like this," she whispered, her eyes welling with unshed tears. "We need to get away, just for a while." Jimin nodded, his expression etched with the same doloration she felt. They packed a small bag and left without saying anything, hoping to find refuge in a quiet downtown hotel. The contrast between the opulence of their home and the simplicity of their temporary haven was stark, but it was exactly what they required. They talked in the privacy of their hotel room. They discussed their fears, hopes, and love for each other. They talked about the baby they both wanted, but on their own terms rather than their families. They made love while tangled in the sheets, their BDEs, moving in an age-old dance, reaffirming their bond. Their $ion was raw, a silent declaration of war on the FRSs attempting to see neutral them. And in the aftermath, as they let their hearts beating in unison, they both realized that their love was stronger than any obstacle in their path. The days turned into weeks, and the tension at home gradually eased. Jimin's parents realized that $hing them would only drive them apart, so they retreated, giving them time to heal. However, the shadow of their interference angered, a constant reminder of the battle they'd fought. Jimin inhaled deeply as they sat in the hotel room one evening and watched the city lights sparkle outside the window. He stated, "We should go back," in a steady voice. "We can't hide forever." YNT tightened her hold on his hand as she nodded. She told him, "But we go back on our terms," while meeting his eyes. "Our marriage, our life, it's ours to live." With a gentle promise of what was to come, he law at Nedin and gave her a key $. Always, he law at Nedin. Consequently, they came back stronger and more unified than before. Without the continual reminder of the better at y'all, the house felt lighter after the maid was fired. However, the scars persisted, a silent reminder of the crucible ordeal their love had gone through, as they collaborated to create a life that was genuinely theirs. The ensuing months were full of hushed discussions and covert smiles. They were aware that there would be difficulties along the way, and that their Families' expectations would never completely fade, but as they held one another, they took solace in the idea that they could conquer anything if they worked together. Despite hardship, their love blossomed, shining brightly in the shadow of familial pressure. When the time came, they would announce their pregnancy as a sign of their own love and readiness, rather than in response to the family's request for an heir.